All right, you ready now, Preston? You sure? I'm really excited about this guy. I know you don't really get excited about these guests, but this is an old friend of mine from Chicago. Amazing pastry chef. I think probably one of the best pastry chefs in America, if not the world. Definitely deserves that credibility. Andres Lara spent a lot of time at Noma, a lot of time at El Bulli, really developed his own style. His pastries speak for themselves. I've always hit him up for advice on all kinds of desserts and pastry things. But anyway, he's here in Nashville doing a dinner with us at Iggy's, and he's moving to Hong Kong pretty soon. So I'm glad that we got to sit down with Andres Lara, one of the best pastry chefs around, very good friend of mine. I hope you enjoy this conversation because we had a really good time doing it. Andres, man, welcome to Nashville. What have you been up to?
Are we starting?
It's already been rolling. We've been starting the whole time.
No, it hasn't.
Yes, it
Fuck
has.
off. Has it
What do
really?
you think? There's gonna be 3, 2, 1. Okay, silence on the set. Silence on the set.
I thought maybe he'd be like, "Yo, guys, you're good to go."
And Ryan Pulley podcast with Andres Lara. Rolling and action. Andres Lara. Is that what you were looking for? Is that what you wanted?
I wanted that kind
All
of
right,
intro.
yeah.
Those are gonna be the outtakes.
Okay.
What's up, man?
How are you, brother?
Good.
It's good to see you. It's been a while.
Dude, the
When's the last
last
time I saw you?
Tokyo, you were there for Noma. I was working for the Chocolate Academy for Cocoa
right.
Berry. That was what, 2017?
No, that was 2014.
Oh my god.
15? That was 2015.
So it's been, holy crap,
It's been a while.
8-9 years since I've seen you.
The pandemic is a time warp, man. It was a fucking time warp.
Yeah, I think you and I were just talking about that, how that's going to be ingrained in our timelines, like
Yeah.
before, during, and after.
Uh-huh.
We're going to know exactly what we were doing, what it was like during, and then right after, all the weirdness that came with it,
Right.
which is still here.
Which is still being weird.
Yeah.
It's like, where were you during the Kennedy assassination? Where were you during the OJ chase?
9/11.
Where were you during 9/11? And where were you during
COVID.
the pandemic? COVID, yeah.
Fuck.
So where were you?
I was in Vegas, man.
Damn.
I was working at a chocolate school, Melissa Copel's chocolate school. We were doing well. We had students coming in all the time. I was traveling a lot as well. Had a lot of consulting coming in, whatnot. Everything was good. And then, boom,
Yeah.
shit happened. Luckily, I kept my job. We kind of pivoted to doing everything online. So it was a weird transition, man. Like, before that, I was also doing a lot of brand ambassador stuff when I was in Asia. So like a lot of stuff for a chocolate company, traveling around, doing demonstrations, classes in front of loads of people, right? Anywhere from 10 people to 100 people. Transition to Vegas, constantly having group classes, 10, 12, 15 people, interaction, And then to go from that to all of a sudden
Nothing.
talking to a camera, having a monologue for, some of these classes would go 3, 4, 5 hours, and there would be students on the other side, but they were typing in questions, and then, we're reading them from a monitor. Wow. So you become really good at entertaining yourself, because you're essentially having a monologue, and you need to not only keep yourself entertained so you don't die of boredom, but most importantly, you need to keep 30 people that are possibly online from all over the world, or more or less, engaged, interact. They need to feel like you're interacting with them. They need to feel engaged. They want to feel like you're talking to them, like you're teaching them, but you can't even speak to them. You can't even see their faces. So it was good though. It was one of those things that, I don't know if you call it a skill set, but it's a skill set.
You learned, yeah, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
Kind of learn on the fly.
You learn to become very comfortable talking to a screen or a camera.
I don't know how you did it. There's no way I could do that, I don't think.
So that was a good experience.
Yeah. All right, let's just backtrack a little bit. As the theme of the podcast is how did we get here? So
Literally, you drove us from your restaurant today.
yeah, correct. Okay, not we, the royal we. Is what I'm trying to say. How did you start cooking?
I wish I had a really romantic story about.
Just make one up. Nobody listens to this shit, man.
And I hate saying my mom was a terrible cook.
Yeah.
And I love her to death. She's like the best human being in the world, but she was a terrible cook.
Yeah.
And I had nobody in my family cooked and baked, let alone. And I'll get back to my mom on that because she's an amazing chef now, amazing cook. But growing up, like, there was no inspiration, culinary wise. I kind of started like my sophomore year of high school. It actually started because I wanted to bake a cake. I wanted to bake a cake for a girl. The idea was great. It was romantic. It was cute. The date part didn't work out. The girl didn't work out. But in the scheme of it all, I figured out. And even though the cake was horrendous, it was it was complete waste. There was something there that kind of sparked something that said, "Oh shit, this is kind of fun. This is crafty. You could actually create something with your hands." And the other thing was too, I never really saw myself going to a traditional university. Mm-hmm. Like I literally had the attention span of a doorknob in high school.
Why did you think that was? Were you a good student? Were you?
I was no, I wasn't a good student. I was a good student for like maybe one subject, that I really enjoyed, literature for some reason. Mm-hmm. To this day I still like writing. I still like reading, especially poetry, things like that. But that was the only subject that for some reason I could focus on, because literally I just couldn't. I didn't have the attention span. I couldn't sit there in a classroom. I had a hard time retaining a lot of information, and I just knew that university wasn't for me. And then when I ultimately found something that engaged my senses, my taste, I love food. I was a fat kid. Grew out of the fat phase, but originally I was an OG fat kid. I started as one, and where I could just use my hands, and then there was no time to get bored. There were so many moving pieces, so many things going on, and which of course I would find out later on when I would go to school and then start my first jobs, that my brain could somehow accept that, like, okay, you could have 3 or 4 or 5 things going on, and that stimulation for some reason, like, it stuck with me.
Helped you focus?
It helped me focus. Yeah. So as opposed to like sit there and read pages 5 to 10 and answer these questions, like, no fucking way. So there was something about that hyper engaged my senses, and I loved it. And then so from there it was just like, all right, go to the aisles in the grocery store, and every time you would check out, you'd get those magazines with like the baking, whatever. Yeah. They were crap recipes. I didn't know any better though. I would just like take them home. I think they were free. With it.
Yeah, right.
I think they were free, and it's like, hey mom, can we get the ingredients for this? This looks kind of cool. My mom, bless her, she's like, sure. She had no idea what she was getting herself into. Like,
yeah, right.
Luckily, I mean, no, I was not clean from the get-go. Now I'm like anally organized and clean, but then it was just like free for all, things everywhere. But I enjoyed the process, and I think the pivotal moment was, I think you and I were talking about this the other day. There was a book called, I think it's The Making of a Chef. Back in the day when we would go to like Barnes and Nobles, and you just spend a couple hours there looking for cookbooks. I would just
sit down on the ground and just like write recipes in my notebook out of the cookbooks, and then go back to the restaurant.
Exactly.
Like, I got some new ideas.
Couldn't afford to buy the books, so you just write a couple recipes.
There's no reason to buy it.
Yeah, and it was a nice ambiance, and they can't kick you out because you're looking at books.
Right.
So I remember this book in particular, The Making of a Chef. And it wasn't even about desserts, but throughout the book, they were interviewing, a bunch of chefs, and kind of the same question. How did you get started? What did you do? What was the road you took to get to where you are? And the commonality, or the common factor that all these chefs or pastry chefs that they were interviewing had, they all said the same thing. I wanted to work for, irrelevant of whether they went to culinary school or not. It was, I wanted to work for this person and this person. And I actually wrote like 5 or 10 different chefs, and maybe 1 or 2 either said yes, or I called them and they said yes, whatever. And that was the common factor. It was always kind of like, I want to aspire to work for these people. And there was nothing really more after that. It was just like, I want to work for this person. And then all of a sudden you go to this chef, you do a good job, and then another door opens. And it's just like a trickle effect, Good things happen if you do good, and not so amazing.
Well, I think it's like in those kitchens you learn more about who the other chefs are.
Yeah.
I worked around Chicago, and I knew a lot of what was going on in Chicago. And when you get into better restaurants, then you hear about these things in New York, and, things that Danielle Boulou is doing, or, this Asian cuisine. This is like back in the 90s, like John George is doing, and you're like reading Food and Wine magazine, you're reading about these guys, and they were just kind of like getting their footing and starting out and opening restaurants. And the more you're exposed to different like-minded people, they bring their travels and their curiosity into the kitchen, and then it kind of like sparks some conversation. And then it came to the point where I was like, okay, I know I have to leave Chicago.
Yeah.
Where am I going to go? And then when I left Chicago and I went to California, then it was in that kitchen was like, now I got to go to Europe. it just kept, every kitchen just kept like leveling up me to like what I needed to do and where I needed to go.
Because you also meet people in those kitchens. You know, you could be working for somebody for a year, and all of a sudden you have a cook or a chef or a stagiaire from another country, from another kitchen. You start engaging them, and they start telling you, "Oh yeah, at this place we do this like this. Oh yeah, I come from here," and then you become curious, and then that curiosity just kind of like it's a little seed that gets kind of planted in your brain. You're like,
Right.
"Oh damn, I never thought about going to Japan, or I never thought about going to Scandinavia," and then it kind of stays with you until who knows when. It could be months from that moment, a year from that moment. All of a sudden, somehow an opportunity opened up. You're like, "Oh crap, I could actually go to Denmark."
It's
or
not even
Oslo
a dream, it's a possibility. And you know a couple people or so. Like I feel like you and I are almost the same. Like, you got the travel bug really early, and
Yeah.
you just like, you and I, we just can't stop fucking traveling, man.
I think that was one thing I had in my head from a very early, even before I started like in pastry. It was that I didn't know pastry was ultimately going to be my ticket to.
Did you want to do savory food?
Never. I never wanted to do savory food. I knew that I wanted to travel. I knew that I wanted to see what the world could offer. I didn't know what that path was going to be. And then as soon as I found pastry, I'm like, this has to be it. This has to be my passport to be able to see the world, to be able to be a part of other cultures, to see how other people live, to learn other languages. Like, I'm very grateful that for some reason I wasn't good in school, but languages have kind of come, I don't want to say easily. I mean, like I half-ass speak several languages, but nonetheless, you could drop me in quite a few countries in this world and I could probably be okay.
Get by, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so that I'm grateful for that. Like, it's allowed me to, I think you and I, it's the same. We've probably seen more than 90% of the
Right.
world, or at least 90 Americans, you know?
Yeah. Or I was in Bali, and I don't know if it was a yoga instructor or somebody just like pointed it out. I think it was at a yoga class. And he's just like, kind of like ending the class and just saying like some words, or all this kind of like meditating. And he's like, we're here, we're in Bali, enjoy the moment, live in the moment, and just realize like we're here. You're the type of people that you're going to see pieces of the world that 90% of the population will never see.
Yeah.
Little corners of Bali that you're just going to go to get a coffee that like, people from your hometown won't even know to be able to find it on a map. Yeah. And at that particular moment, it really put a lot into perspective for me of not being grateful is not the right word, just really put into perspective of like the places I've been and the things that I've done, the friends that I've made along the way, the people like yourself that like to travel. And, we all kind of have this like kindred Lunderlust. What is Lunderlust?
Wanderlust?
Yeah. But I feel like it's more than that with like cooks, because there's this part of my brain that, like you, at an early age, at the first couple chefs I ever worked for, they're like, listen, if you want to be good in this industry, you got to travel as much as you can. You got to see as much of the world as you can. And that was like instilled in my first 3-4 years of cooking. Was like, not like you got to have sharp knives or your jacket's got to be clean, or, all that stuff came with the job also. Or you have to know every, butchering technique. It was, you have to see the world and you have to have like a worldview. That seemed to be the running theme of all the chefs that I worked for. So I was like young, impressionable, working, I didn't go to college just like you, and I was flung into like an adult environment. My friends were like 30-year-olds.
And I mean, going back to that, it's scary. Like
it was a hard time figuring out who I was, and it was a dark 4-5 years for me. It was very dark,
and it's lonely because
super lonely.
I lost tons of friendships.
Everybody.
Like literally
every high school friend, after like a month, it was like, you can't hang out on the weekends. Like, no, how about Wednesday?
Every close high school friend, or any close high school friend, I probably keep in touch with like 3 people from my childhood, and those are time tested. Like, no matter what, they will be in my life. But you lose soon. That second, like, all right, you're not going to university. Cool, everyone else is. All right, you're going to pastry school, 6 months. Boom, you're gonna be working full time plus going to pastry school, and then after that, your life is the kitchen. Relationships are done.
Everything.
Your girlfriend, that's out the window.
It's a transient lifestyle.
And you can no longer relate to those people because they're studying, they're enjoying themselves on the weekends. They've got 4 years of that. They're doing all these very collegiate things that have nothing to do with your life anymore. Yeah. And you can't really talk to them about what you're doing. It's like, yeah, I got really good at molding this or piping this. That's like, what do you have to relate to? Like,
who cares?
Hey, we put on a new dish on the menu this week. Okay, cool.
Yeah. It was a real, I still remember this today. It was a real sad. I just remember being like very sad I had started working in kitchens in high school in like a summer job and it was whatever. But when I graduated high school and all my friends went to college, and even the guys that didn't go to college, that stayed to community college, they were still like city workers working 9 to 5, Friday, Saturdays off. And I remember like they were throwing a huge party at the lake house when it's one of the guys' lake houses or family's lake houses. And like, you should come. And I couldn't go because I had to work Saturday. I couldn't take a weekend off. You're crazy. And I remember I was like, oh, my days off are Wednesday, Thursday. And I just remember them looking at me like, who has Wednesday and Thursday off, And that was the last time that they stopped calling me to do things.
Yeah.
And then like a couple more weeks went by and I would like call them or we'd play phone tag. It was well before texting, And then I found out like another day they went like I don't know if they went to like another event or like a local fair or carnival. I don't remember what the fuck it was. And nobody called me to ask me because it was just like, well, we know you can't go. And it was like, well, at least call me to say no. And that was the turning point of like, and then I'm on my days off, I'm hanging out with like 30-year-olds and I'm 18, 19. Yeah. And I was like caught in between this world of like this very adult environment of doing extremely adult things, of like these guys sneaking me into bars. There's drugs all around. Like I didn't really get into like hard drugs like that, like at 18. I was like, holy fuck. Again, the chefs that I was working for kind of like, don't hang out with these guys. Don't do this. You're on a good road. Like I had a lot of good people like pushing me, but that was the life, man. And everybody my age, like I couldn't relate to them anymore. And I was like sad. It was a very sad 3-4 years for me until I started working at like better restaurants and I started finding people like myself that were my age, that went to culinary school, that were working, that were doing it. But that didn't come to like 5 years later as I started working.
And also people that probably have the same goals as you.
Same goals.
Visions. Like you were probably geeking out with them about other chefs or, reading cookbooks together, saying, oh, I'm going to go work for this chef. Yeah, dude, I want to go work for there as well. Or,
right.
Or even planning things with other people. Like, yeah, we should go together.
Or on our days off, I would go over to like Tim's house and we would just get ice cream and practice our canals.
Yeah.
That's like what we would do. We'd like smoke weed and practice canals. That was like so much fun, man.
Love it.
So let's back up a little bit more. Like, where did you go to culinary school at?
So, all right. So we'll backtrack a little bit. Before culinary school, after I read this book, it opened up. It was like that pivotal moment. Like, okay, this is what I want to do, and now I know what I have to do. I need to start knocking on people's doors. I'm still a sophomore in high school, not ready. I can't go to culinary school yet, but fuck it, just start knocking on people's doors. So I remember there was a magazine called Pastry, Art and Design. It would come out monthly. So I would always go to.
Is that still around?
I don't think so. I think there's a digital version of it.
Yeah.
So I would go to Barnes and Nobles every month when it would come out, and I would look to see if there were any chefs that were featured in there that were in Chicago.
Sure.
That's where I was at the time. And after a couple months, I have like a couple resources and whatnot. I'm like, okay, cool. I would literally, and like how naive I was, I would literally like call the kitchen number. I would call the Ritz-Carlton hotel asking for the kitchen, asking for, at that time, and Ming Su was the pastry chef for Ritz-Carlton. Yeah. Like, fucking 16-year-old. Like, why would these people even take the time? Like, so, long story short, got hung up on many times. Everyone was not kind enough. I think they had to take the phone call thinking it was something important. I was probably calling them in the middle of production or service, and they probably wanted to tell me to fuck off. I was 15, 16 years old. So I got rejected a lot, but I also got accepted a lot. And I had some really shitty experiences in kitchens at 16 where I was like, no, there's no fucking way I'm doing this. And then, and I told you the other night, the moment, the stage at 16 that like set everything in motion for me. It was at a restaurant called Trio. It was before Grand Achatz was at Trio. I think it was Sean McLean.
Sean McLean.
Sean McLean was the chef there, and I only
You were
knew
too young to even realize what the fuck was going on.
I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
I'm like, Trio, okay, it's in Evanston. That's not too far. Della, she was super nice. Della Gusset.
Della Gusset, man.
She's like, yeah, come hang out for the weekend. Cool. So I go, and this is, mind you, after having a couple really shitty experiences where I didn't even get thrown into pastry. I got thrown into like the savory side and hated it. And I get to Della's kitchen. You know, it's the first time I see like a separate pastry section. Or let alone room, right?
Yeah.
In Trio.
Normally it's like a folding table.
So that was like, oh shit, this is cool. And then I remember at that time her whole brigade were females. They were meticulous, they were militant, but they were very nice to me. Like, gave me tasks, really mundane tasks.
Yeah.
Of course, I had no experience, but anything I wanted to try, cool. Any questions I had, like stupid things like, oh, what's this? Or how do you know, really naive questions. I hadn't even gone to culinary school. They didn't mind answering, especially Della. Like, gave me a ton of stuff to taste. That was the first time I saw pâte de fruits in my life. I'm like, wow, these things are so beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, seeing ice cream and sorbet being churned in a restaurant and like a canal for the first time.
But no point of reference other than
No.
you go to the grocery store and buy ice cream. No
Exactly.
idea how the fuck it was made. And now there's a machine and you're tasting it as it's coming out. Like, that's a game changer, man.
Caramelized pineapple for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
I saw out of Della's kitchen. Like, holy shit, you could do that to a pineapple. You could do that to a piece of fruit. That was the first time I was like, wow, this is really enjoyable. I can't believe I didn't even realize that 12 hours just went by because it was just like a day full of wonder. And I want to do this because there's people like Della out there. Like, there's going to be a lot of assholes, but there's also going to be a lot of people that want to teach you,
Right,
and want to nourish you. And obviously, you need to. It goes both ways. You need to work your ass off. You need to be disciplined. You need to shut up and get your job done. But there's going to be those people that are going to take the time to allow you to become who you ultimately could be. And
yeah, right. I agree.
and I never after that I never worked for Della, but I do owe her like. That was she was my
Write her a letter.
write her a letter. I think I might have messaged her on Instagram at some
Just
point.
write her a letter, man. Send her a note. Della, if you're listening, which you're probably not because nobody listens to this.
Nobody listens to this.
Andres Lara would like to say thank you.
All two viewers.
It's all your fault.
It's all your fault, Della. She's like, why are they talking so much shit about me right now?
So that was the moment. So
That was the moment, and then again, it was these series of little moments. Okay, Trio, Della, cool. Then I ended up knocking on the door of, again, I had no idea what I was walking into. Rick Bayless's Frontera Grill in
right on,
Tupelo.
yeah.
Again, I'm like,
Great
okay,
guy.
who's Rick Bayless? This place looks
yeah, but
like
if you're
it
gonna
has
knock
good
on a door to talk to someone,
But it wasn't because of him. It was because I was trying to follow the pastry chef there. Again,
Who was the pastry
So
chef?
at that time, her name was Laura Pfeiffer, Mexican woman who had studied. You know, she was French trained.
she was related to Jackie.
Yes. So,
Yeah, we'll get to that.
I'm getting
Yeah,
into
okay.
that. So same thing. Called her up.
I know her.
Can
yes.
I come
Yeah,
chill
yeah,
out?
Yeah.
Not chill out. Can I come stage? Yes. And I started as literally one Saturday.
I used to work at Trio, you know. Like I was Della's, assistant for a day.
Exactly. For a day.
For a day.
That's going on my CV. I bet you people put that on CVs nowadays.
Definitely. 100%. They
I
stretch it out.
staged at Alinea for a day.
For a day, yeah.
And same thing. Wanted to, seek out Laura, and she let me in. And it was one Saturday that at the end of my shift, do you want to come back? And I was like,
Wait, is it what?
What?
Is it possible?
next Saturday? She's like, yeah. And then that Saturday, I'm like, so can I just keep coming back on Saturdays? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. So
That
I mean,
was such a different time, man.
I wasn't getting paid, but who cares?
Yeah,
I was
who cares?
fucking,
Right,
I was
exactly.
going into my junior year of high school. So, and I didn't know who Jackie and Sebastian were at this time at the French Pastry School. I was just like,
What year was this?
This was what? I graduated in, I want to say it was like 1997.
So Jackie Pfeiffer and Sebastian Cannon, they left their jobs at the hotel by
They
then,
opened
and
up
they
the
had
old
studio.
school, the studio,
That's where
which I
took
never saw,
classes.
but you saw.
I took classes there in like 90, it had to be 98.
Then they opened up the new school
Big
at the
school,
time.
yeah.
And so what had happened was, okay, I realized Laura Pfeiffer was married to Jackie.
who's like one of the most badass pastry chefs in the country.
I had no idea.
right.
And but the way she put it was like, oh yeah, my husband, he's opening a pastry
school.
My
husband, he's got a little school.
Yeah.
You know?
And I was like, cool. And they were still doing continuing ed classes. They hadn't started the full 6-month program.
Sure. Okay.
So they were doing a petit four class. Okay. I'm a junior in high school.
Yeah.
I was like, Mom, and I saved some money up for the class. It was like a 2 or 3 day petit four class. I'm like, Mom, it's during class.
I mean, it wasn't cheap either.
No, fuck no.
It was a couple $100, man, for like a couple days, you know?
I was like, Mom, can I ditch school to go take a class in the city? No hesitation. She's like, she didn't understand what this whole pastry thing was, but she saw that I was into it.
Yeah.
Like she had no idea what her son was getting
into.
She
probably saw that it was like a positive influence. At least you were into something.
But
you know?
She was ridiculously supportive, like didn't hesitate. I don't know what other mother would have allowed her son or daughter to ditch high school for 3 days to go take a petit four class. So that's what I did, man. I took the train, put my big boy pants on, took the train to the city. I was like 17, and there's all these grown ass people taking and they're all professionals.
Professionals, man.
And there I am, and I'm like, this is awesome, guys.
Yeah.
Like there I got to, that was the new school. They hadn't started the program yet, but I'm like, holy crap, like a blast freezer? What is that? Like copper pots. Like everything's pristine, everything's beautiful. There's a system for everything. Everything's methodical. I was into it. Mm-hmm. And that's when I got to, Jackie taught the class, and then that's how I ended up going to the French pastry school. So it was just these series of events. Okay, I got in the door with at Frontier Grill. Laura Pfeiffer was there.
That's
this
crazy.
was her ex-husband. She got me into the school, and so.
Don't you think that's how it was supposed to happen?
It must have been.
It had to. How other way could it have happened?
I'm sure that, one random day, had I not gone to Barnes & Nobles and picked up that book, I probably would have gone down.
I go back and forth on this. I think you were seeking something so hard, your brain was seeking this information that you would have wound up there, even though it would have been a different road. You would have wound up eventually at the French pastry school.
I think
you just bypassed it by like hanging out with the guy's wife.
That sounds so
weird. Right.
That sounds so weird.
But I think like you would have kept going to these restaurants. You would have kept calling places.
Yeah.
If you didn't pick up that magazine, you would have found another way to get into the industry somehow.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether your parents would have helped you or, I remember when I first started cooking, one of my dad's old partners or something, I was 17, or I was graduating high school, I think. And they were on a cruise, and they were talking to the chef of the cruise, and they were saying like, oh, my friend's son wants to become a chef, and he's working at these restaurants. And the guy gave some advice. I don't remember what the advice was. And they came back, and he's like, hey, give him this. And it was a toque. It was like a paper toque. And I was like, this is the coolest. Like, I didn't know that you could buy a case of them for like $5, and like at the end of the day, you throw it away. Like, but I was like the coolest thing. And the guy like signed it and said, best of luck, blah, blah, blah. And they had brought it to me and said, hey, listen, this guy said, think about cruise ships. It's a great way to travel. You're going to learn a lot of like organization. So when I put it out to the world that, I wanted to like work at restaurants, like even people that had no fucking idea what they were talking about, everybody wants to help. Yeah. My dad's friends were like, oh, we're on a cruise. We talked, here's a toque. Like this guy says, think about cruise ships. And, I was watching Julia Childs, and I was picking up things there, and I was helping my mom make cookies, and I was just immersed in it. And I feel like you were immersing yourself in it also, and like knocking on doors, which you had the intuition to go and do that. Like that's like at a young age, that's like a very adult fucking mature thing to do.
I have a feeling that you and we have a lot of similarities, but and correct me if I'm wrong. We have that thing in us that we don't like to suck at something we do, and if we find something that we love, it's like you go balls, you go all out on it, and you become obsessed, where to the point where you either become good at it or you want to understand it better than everyone else. Mm-hmm. Kitchen aside, it could be anything. Right. For you it's BJJ. we both have that love for martial arts. I don't do it as much anymore.
Staying
CrossFit,
healthy, eating
staying
right, staying healthy.
Oh, it's you grab those 3 or 4 things in your life other than your job, and you just go. You're like hyper intensely focused on those things, and you want to do them to the best of your ability, better than everyone else,
Right.
or at least people around you, because it just becomes like, all right, I don't need to do a million things, but the 3 or 4 things I'm gonna do, I'm gonna fucking do them amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately probably something that helped that early on too. Like, okay, I found this, I'm gonna do whatever it takes and find out as much as I can to see if this is gonna be my reality. And yeah, it was a big wake up call really fast, man. Like going to pastry school and then literally like jumping on a train when class was over, running over to Frontera, working full time.
Oh, you're working also. Yeah.
Oh, I was working full time, man. So like I had no life. I had 0 life for those 6 months that I was in pastry school. Sundays would come because that was Frontera was closed.
Yeah.
So I would work Saturdays. Sundays would come. I was a freaking zombie. Like I would get back home Saturday night. Sometimes my mom, again, her and her now husband, at that time boyfriend, they would sometimes pick me up in the city on a Saturday night, like just so that I wouldn't have to take the train to Howard and then back from
fall
Howard to the
asleep
suburb.
on the train and miss your stop.
Dude,
and
I saw
how many
so
times,
many
man.
shady things on that train, like that late at night.
Yeah. For me, it was the train. When I was living with my parents by Midway Airport, the orange line would stop running at a certain hour.
Yeah.
So if we were like fucking around in the cleanup, I'd miss the train and I'd have to take like 7 buses and then like walk 3 miles just to get home.
And I never wanted to fall asleep on that train that late.
Never. Oh man, you missed your stop. You're done.
No, not even them, man. I saw some shady shit on those
that
trains.
too. Yeah,
Like
especially the
I
Howard
was
stop, yeah.
literally, I was kind of scared. I'm like, dude, I'm 17 years old. I'm riding the train back at like midnight. Like
Right.
all senses, like you're wide awake. Like, don't fuck with me,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a tough 6 months, but it was good because it gave me a harsh reality of what the business was going to be like. Sundays I was a zombie, had no life, had no friends, lost my girlfriend, etc., etc. But it is what it is. That's what it became.
Yeah, but you had your work friends.
Yeah,
Who were all ages.
The youngest one was probably like 25 at the time.
Yeah, but they were like all races, ages. Some of them didn't even speak English. You're just like, that's my friend.
And the drama, I quickly got introduced to kitchen drama. Like, holy fuck. It was like kind of like high school. You're like, holy crap, this stuff happens.
A lot of politics going on.
Politics, and then, you got to do this for this person to get here, and that person's dating this person. And oh, fuck me. Like,
all right, so you graduate from the Fresh Pastry School. Was the diploma like a pulled sugar diploma?
No, it wasn't a pulled sugar diploma. Yeah, graduated from
was marzipan, and he's just like,
yeah, rolled out diploma, burnt the edges,
burnt the edges.
Like a scroll. Finished pastry school, ended up doing another year at Frontera. So I was there for about 2 years, including the time that I was in high school.
Where is Laura Pfeiffer now, man?
I don't know. I lost complete touch with her. I know that she opened up I want to say like a Mexican bakery, like probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it's called Bonbon.
I think you're
which
right.
is like candy or chocolate.
I think you're right. Yes.
I have no idea if it's still around.
Who was teaching at the French pastry school back then?
So I think I was very fortunate because at the beginning, obviously it was just Jackie and Sebastian. One of their assistants at the time, John Krause.
John Krause is legend, yeah.
John Krause is probably one of the people who's not only been most influential in my life, but he's been like a father figure, a big brother figure, a very good friend to this day, a mentor, all those things, and just an all-around amazing human being. For me, he's probably one of the best American pastry chefs like that this country's ever seen.
Do you know Bob Hartwig?
I do.
Yeah, so Bob, I'm very good. Me and Bob worked at Mango together, which was down the street from Frontera Grill, which was probably the same time that you were there.
Yes.
97, 98, 99, more or less.
Yeah.
All the years are
all those people.
We were literally 2 blocks away from each other back in 98.
I was starting out. You
were
already
starting out.
Yeah.
That was my first introduction. That was my first introduction of like getting out of the South Side restaurants and the country clubs working at. This was like a real kitchen with like people my age, and Bob was the pastry chef. I've known that motherfucker for like almost 30 years now, man.
Damn, he seems like a cool guy.
He's amazing.
I only met him a handful of times. I think when I went to visit the school.
Yeah.
But so John was.
But he's very good. That reminds me that he speaks very highly of John. Also.
So John was an assistant there, and it was crazy because John was already a pastry chef at that point. Like, dude had worked in amazing places in London. Like, he was an established pastry chef.
Yeah.
he had a family. He was married at the time there to somebody, and he decided to just take a step back and like put himself in stagiaire shoes ultimately.
Yeah.
And I think that had a big impact on me, that it was never too late or to learn or to go take a step back. It doesn't matter if you already got that title of pastry chef or whatever. At some point you could be like, you know what? I'm going to take a break and take a step back and just go stage somewhere for 6 months, for a year, and just become the student all over again. And that's very refreshing, and it was also very humbling to see somebody that at that caliber who could have had a good paying job, could have worked anywhere, to say, no, I'm gonna take a step back and work for free. That I needed to see that, because that was that it was this little seed of discipline and what it takes to make it that he instilled in me, just by him opening my eyes to like, holy shit, you're working for free, you're already a pastry
Even the
chef.
self-reflection, self-awareness, to be like, I'm good, I'm on this road, I could be better.
Yeah.
Here's an opportunity.
Or
that I can take.
I want to learn something completely different,
wanna learn
and
something
from
completely different.
somebody that could offer that to me. So I'm going to take a step back.
Yeah.
So it was a cool time to be at the French pastry. I was literally the second class to graduate, because every week I either had Jackie or Sebastian as an instructor. And as the years went by, as the school got bigger, they aren't teaching as much.
Yeah,
They bring in, an armada of instructors who were all amazing. But ultimately, like, to be able to have had Jackie show you how to do viennoiserie, or the things he was very passionate about, show pieces, which I don't like show pieces, but at that time you're just like, wow. And then to have Sebastian like, talk to you about technology, like who's talking about technology, like food science, and that in terms of confections and ganache and ice cream. That was the first time I learned that ice cream's not just like, here's some eggs and cream. No, there's
no fucking way, man.
And
Absolutely
I geeked out on it. I loved it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you need to use these sugars for this reason, and if you want it to freeze like this, you do this, and you need to use these hydrocolloids for this function, and blah 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 blah. And all of a sudden, it wasn't just pastry anymore. It was like, holy shit, this is science too, and it's exact. And for some reason, I'm comprehending this, and I sucked as a student in school. But for some reason,
I'm a
this
mathematician
is sticking.
now.
But holy shit,
I'm the same way.
And math class, like I look back at high school math class, I'm like, the only thing I use now are fucking percentages.
That's it.
Everything
man.
else was a
Everything's
waste
percentage.
of time.
When I took those classes at that little studio, it was like 6. It was the same thing. It was like I was 17. There was like pastry chefs from Vegas that were running like 10 outlets there.
Yeah.
And I'm like this kid, and Jackie and Sebastian were there. I remember we were tempering chocolate, and I was having a hard struggling with it, and Jackie saw it, and he came up behind me, and he took my hands, and he like showed me how to do it. Like, from like a master pastry chef.
Yeah.
Like those moments, like those are the moments that shape you as a person, as a cook. Those moments that I remember of like looking back now, as I get older, it's like when the first time I ever had sea urchin, or first time I ever saw sea urchin, was at the French Laundry, and Thomas showed me how to clean it, open it, and just stuck a spoon in there. I was like, what is that? I never tasted it before. And he just shoved it in my mouth. And I was like, holy fuck. And he's like, what do you taste? And we talked about what you're tasting. It's like those moments of talking to these guys at the peak of their greatness, it like instills this like fire and passion that you want more. Like those are the things that I remember.
And it's not just the moment, but it's the fact that person took took the time in that moment to share it with you, to show you something,
or saw that I was struggling.
Especially when you're here and they're there, for them to take 2 minutes and be like, taste this. Right. What do you think of this?
Right.
To acknowledge your being a human in that kitchen when you feel like you're just a fucking robot.
Right.
In most kitchens, right? When you're at the bottom, that moment becomes kind of crystallized in time, and you have that forever. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I have several of those little moments that might have lasted 2 minutes, but they make this beautiful timeline.
Yeah,
and that's what you remember. You forget all the bad shit.
You forget, how much bad shit have we gone through?
Oh my God.
How many times people screamed at me or thrown rotten fucking apricots at me? But I remember the good times, man.
But one of the things that like I kind of like when I say that you take those seconds or moments and you crystallize them in time. I remember it was plated dessert class with Sebastian, and of course the desserts were great and everything tasted good, but it was more the impression he left on me wasn't the recipes. It was the way he talked about the things and how he worked. It was like the spoon goes like this.
Mm-hmm.
The napkin goes like this. A tool for every function. Every container has its place. Like, it was all about, he was essentially breaking down the word mise en place in the most articulate way. And that was one of those fuck me moments. I need to be like that. I want to be a fucking militant machine where everything's lined up perfectly. If I see a speck of water on the sink, I'm going to freak out because the hair on my arm stands up and I can't take it. I want to be immaculate. And I got that from Sebastian. Like, I think my mom instilled a lot of discipline just because they were quite, they weren't hard on me growing up per se, but they were very kind of like old school Latin parents. So like, you need to make your bed. You need to have your things folded like this. When you're at the dinner table, elbows can't be on the table. Like, everything had to be aligned. So I think that carried over to pastry, to cooking. And then, you meet people like Sebastian that all of a sudden just like, this is how it has to be.
Well, it has to be but it's also a reason. It's not just like, oh, this is how it is. So
exactly
the reasoning behind it is
there's a place for everything.
Is what makes it, and then for me, it was always like you went to the next restaurant or you went to your next job and you took those things that you used and you were a little bit better. You were a little bit more organized. You kind of like could adapt a little bit better.
Yeah.
And you just keep going and going,
And you see that too. And I think people notice that too. Like when you're, because it's not every chef and not every pastry chef is extremely organized or extremely meticulous or extremely like OCD. I think we all want to say we are, but the reality is they're not.
Some chefs are the most disorganized fucking people I've ever seen, and it's magical what they do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, holy fuck.
And that's fine.
You're like, wow.
And that's fine. But I think it's always like one of those moments of pride when you walk into a kitchen and somebody, after a day, they're like, oh, wow, you're really organized. Or like, oh, I can see you like things like this.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to have a further conversation. You know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's that, you're on point. It's like,
or you could. Someone told me you should be able to blindfold yourself and walk onto your station for service and know where your salt is, where your pepper mill is, where the oil bottle is, where your garnishes are, where the plates are, where your cutting board is, where your knife is. And that was instilled in me of like, every day you put the salt in the same spot because it's muscle memory. I'm turning around. I got my lamb saddle, my salt's here, boom. My pepper's here, boom. I turn around, my pan's already on the stove. I grab the oil, boom. Lamb goes in,
and
come back, wipe down your board, fold your towel, put it back. Like after every pickup, wipe the board down, fold the towel, put it back. Knife rests on top of the towel.
And it's a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful, man. And when you're humming and you're going and you're just like, bam, and you're in that zone of just like working, it's so great.
And it's even cooler when that trickles down to your staff, to your team, where all of a sudden they become that too. Like, without you saying it, just because you've instilled that, you've showed it, you've demanded it every day. And sometimes, like, I remember being in Asia and like, I wouldn't even say, sometimes I would literally walk over to my staff, fold their towel for them, put it back a line. They would look at me like, yeah, chef. Okay. Like, you get it. And then it gets to the point where they're not going to let me walk over and do that anymore. So they just start doing it. I had one of my team in Singapore. I was working for Jason Atherton. Probably the coolest pastry setup I've ever had. It was, at the time, it was called Pollen, named after his flagship in London, the one-star Pollen Street Social. We had a beautiful dessert bar that was in the middle of the dining room. And so we had counter seating there. So everyone in the dining room could see the pastry team work, and they could also move over from the dining experience to the dessert counter, and you could plate for them. And the team I had there, they were all female. Actually, almost like all 3-4 years between Singapore and Hong Kong. We'll get to that later. But it was all female teams and some of the best teams I've ever had. And I remember, like, it got to the point where, like, because we had a lot of desserts, and there were a lot of components and blah, blah, blah. So we would have, like, everything laid out by, like, okay, this section's for this dessert, across the line. We had a really beautiful space. It got to the point where they would start drawing diagrams of the setup.
Yeah.
At like a fucking map, like a quest. And then they would laminate it and they would just put it down so that everybody knew this is the spoon for this crumble. This is the spoon for this canal, not that. Like, it's separate from that ice cream. Right. This piping bag goes in here. Everything would be labeled. But it was like, that was one of those moments I'm like, yeah, this is cool. That's my team.
Fuck, man.
Yeah.
All right, let's get back to Chicago, late 90s. You graduated. You got your sugar diploma.
Yeah. So I kept in touch with John Kraus.
Yeah.
After Frontera Grill, I ended up working for John at he was at the Park Hyatt at the time.
Uh-huh.
So it was cool because I got to have John as like a teacher assistant at the pastry school, and then he was
your chef.
He was my chef.
That's dope.
Again, like
Was he the pastry chef there?
I
didn't know
he
that.
Was, he was. It was shortly after the Park Hyatt Chicago opened, so he wasn't the opening
With
pastry
Sandor Gamba. That was the opening
chef. Yeah, so
chef.
Sandro was my exec chef. Andrew Zimmer.
Andrew Zimmer. It was
Andrew
came after that. They hired the French guy after him, right?
I was there when Andrew was there.
Super tall French guy.
I was there during Andrew's time.
What year was that?
No, sorry, that was two separate times. No, let's backtrack. Yeah. So Sandro was the exec chef. John Kraus was my pastry chef there, and it was great. You know,
that was right when it opened, right?
Yeah, it was right after the opening. It was enjoyable. You know, I got to continue learning in the style of the French pastry school because ultimately John was, you know, a disciple of that, and so we were doing a lot of. It was cool because I had already been groomed by Jackie and Sebastian, so you go in there like I know what dextrose is.
Yeah, totally. I know how to balance a sorbet recipe.
You know,
I know how to make the flourless chocolate cake.
and it's cool, but at the same time, you get a lot of looks from these like 30-year-olds that are like that didn't get that education, but they'd already been grinding for 10 years, and so they think all of a sudden you're like, who the fuck is this kid?
Yeah, that's the worst part.
So you needed to very quickly realize, okay, you can't, you know stuff. Your hands don't have the experience that these other people do, but you have possibly more in your head. So you need to keep grooming what you have in your head. You have to keep nourishing that, all the food science, et cetera, because you're already ahead of them in that. But you also now need to nourish your hands, and you need to get to where they are with your hands, so that ultimately you have this complete package. So, you know, it's that fine line of not becoming this pompous little asshole at 18 or 19 and just shutting up and like knowing what you know, but then taking everything else in.
That's so hard.
And it's very hard to do. And I saw it in many kitchens as a cook and as a pastry chef that, you know, students that would come out of the CIA or the French pastry school,
Kendall,
wherever, that like they just went in there thinking they were the fucking chefs.
Totally.
and knew it all. And you're like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
You know? So John ultimately left the Park Hyatt. He went back to work with Jackie and Sebastian as a full-time instructor.
Full teacher, yeah, okay.
So I was like, John, you got to send me somewhere, man. You're leaving me. You got to send me somewhere cool. You know, you got to send me to a chef. So he sent me to what ultimately became one of the real like hardest experiences of my life. So at the time, and nothing but respect for the man now, but at the time I was pretty miserable. Pascal Janvier was this chocolatier pastry chef, old school dude from Normandy. He worked for Barry Callebaut for a really long time. Now he lives in Australia. I don't even know. I think he might be retired at this point.
Was in Chicago?
No. So John and Pascal had done a competition together. Pascal was always in the magazine, so I always got to see his beautiful entremets and stuff. And he had a pastry shop in Los Gatos, California.
Jesus.
A little tiny ritzy.
Fuck?
Yeah. So John, where are you gonna send me? And it was between going to work for Thomas Haas, who I really wanted to work for in Canada, but like Canada for some reason seemed out of reach. And
but Los Gatos was more tangible. I mean, what the fuck?
Yeah, Thomas. Thomas is like, what, you know who Thomas Haas is?
I don't think so. What restaurant?
He was one of the first kind of like name chefs of Danielle in New York. So before anybody was there, he was the first kind of pastry chef to make a name for himself. German dude. He then left Danielle to open up his shop in Vancouver.
And who took over for him at Danielle? Dominique Ansel.
No, this was way before.
Way before.
There was a guy, Francois something.
I
remember. It was a dude that had this. He became famous for this
not
like Rice
Jacques
Krispie
Torres. No, Francois. Not Paillard.
No, not Paillard.
Not Paillard. Paillard was there though.
No,
Paillard worked with Danielle
way
before our time.
There was another chef who took after Danielle,
yeah.
and then ultimately it was Dominique. But I never got to work with Thomas Haas. But whenever I was in Vancouver, you know, he's a really cool guy.
What restaurant was he at? Or he has his own pastry shop?
He has a shop. He has a beautiful shop that's been
still
running. There. Yeah, and he was doing wholesale chocolate for a really long time, like supplying all the Ritz-Carltons in the U.S.
Yeah, fuck.
He's a machine. You know, he's a marathon biker, like us. He's he loves being active, fit, disciplined as fuck, and all his staff always looks so happy to be there working for him. Like Always wanted to work for him, never did. We had a lot of common friends.
So anyway, so you go to Los Gatos
So I go to Los Gatos, California. It
in
was
the Brussels sprout fields.
very ritzy little suburb next to San Jose. I couldn't live in Los Gatos.
Was Manresa there at the time? Was
This was
Manresa?
before Manresa. Man.
Jesus Christ.
Or
man.
no. Manresa was there. I think it had just
It had to
opened.
be brand new,
So-
huh? This was, what, early 2000s?
Yeah. So
What year? Wait, what year? Hang on. What year was this?
this was early 2000s.
Dude, me and you have been following. So I was at the French Laundry in 2001 and 2003.
Okay, so I was.
Me and you were like following each
So
other.
I was
all
like an
around,
hour
man.
away from
you.
you,
were an
too.
hour away at Los Gatos, yeah.
All right, so this is it. I'm moving to San Jose, California. Right. There's very minimal information on the internet.
Yeah.
I find a guy, I think in an ad, who was renting out his house. He had 2 bedrooms extra. He's like, yeah, I'll rent him out. I'm renting him out. I call him on the phone. I'm like, this is what I'm doing. I'm moving to San Jose. Can I rent out a room? Sure. Guy sounded super happy-go-lucky.
Yeah.
You have no fucking idea.
Ex-murderer. I can only imagine, dude.
Along those lines. So I get to San Jose.
What are you, 24, 25 at the time?
Oh, dude, I'm not even 21.
Oh, Jesus Christ, man.
So the pastry shop is like, I remember it was this really steep hill from where I lived in San Jose to get down to Los Gatos. I didn't have a car, so I had a bicycle. My shift would start at like 4:30 or 5 in the morning. So I would be riding a bike at like 4:15 in the morning down this hill
Dark as
to Los
fuck.
Gatos. I can't, anytime I rode a bike on a Friday night, several times I got pulled over by the cops because they thought I was like, I had a backpack in.
Yeah, right.
So they were like, what's in your bag? I'm like, I'm just going to work.
Pastry
officer.
tools, spatulas.
Just going to work, I promise.
It's a whisk.
Cold as fuck at like 4:30 in the morning.
my sugar diploma.
Get to the pastry shop. Ultimately, I got a crappy little car, I think for like $500. It was a stick shift, so I had to learn how to drive stick.
Up a hill.
Just because it was the only thing I could afford. But the bicycle thing lasted for several months until I just got too cold where I'm like, this is I can't fucking do this. And Pascal's super old school Normandy, like militant, like he was in the army.
Yeah.
He came from this really old lineage of French pastry chefs. Dude, it was rough. He's like later on I saw him in life. I saw him in Australia and like we kind of laughed about things and he saw me once in Singapore and he looked at me because he knew he put me through some shit.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and this was when I was the pastry chef at Pollen and came to have desserts. He looked at me and shook my hand. He's like, "We're good, right?" Like he remembers. And
You're
I'm
gonna
like,
kill me, are you?
I'm like, "Yeah, chef, we're good for all the shit you put me through."
Yeah.
But that was cool. That was a really cool. So let's backtrack to Los Gatos. So, really traditional pastry shop. We were doing quiches in the morning, baking them off, doing entremets, petit gâteau.
You were never interested in doing hot food.
Never. I got very influenced, especially when I got to Scandinavia, by the savory side. But it was never a question. It was never like, oh, do I want to try it? No. And when the few stages I had when I was in high school in a couple restaurants, I hated. And I knew right away. I'm like, I don't want to do the savory side. I didn't like the kind of work that I was doing. Like, obviously, for you, it's very different. It's the complete opposite.
Well, it's not. I wanted to be a pastry chef when I first started.
Or for a lot of chefs, they look at pastry like, no, it's not for me. And that's what it was for me. Like, no, this isn't for me. This is 100% it, or it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so back to Los Gatos, yeah, man, it was a rough one. It was I was there for about 8 months. I kind of cracked at one point. I couldn't take it anymore. But
there, man.
It was
That
tough.
toughens you up a little, though.
It was tough. But it's good because it gives you stories to talk about later on in life, which are amazing.
Yeah. On podcasts.
On a podcast that you can laugh about. At the time, you feel humiliated as fuck.
Yeah.
But it also just makes you grow that second layer of skin. Like it makes you tougher, rougher, maybe a little bit bitter, but it is what it is, and it starts to shape you. Though I would never talk shit because he's an amazing man and an amazing professional. But the one thing he made me do that I was like, dude, are you fucking serious? And he was just fucking with me. Like it didn't have to be this way. So we would make the royale, the filling for the quiche. We would line the quiche molds with the dough, freeze them, and then we would fill them with if it was mushroom or onion, whatever, caramelized onions, and then pour the royale in. And I remember I was down to my last 2 quiche, right? And I had slightly overfilled one, not overflowing, just slightly overfilled. So the other one, the last one, had a little bit less. I'll never forget this moment, man. He walks over to me with a straw, hands it to me. I'm like, the fuck do you want me to do with the straw? He's like, I want you to transfer the quiche mix from this to that quiche and don't get it in your mouth. And this was like in front of all the staff. And I was like, oh, you fucking kidding me? So literally I'm sitting there trying not to get the fucking Royale in my mouth, sucking it up with a straw.
A Royale is a mixture of milk, cream and eggs.
Yeah.
Yeah, gross.
From one quiche to, and I'm talking like a cm of
Could you take a spoon and do it?
No, that wasn't an option. It wasn't an option to use a spoon. It was a straw was the weapon
You
of
should take
choice.
the canal spoon that's only for that canal for that dessert and use it.
So I said yes, chef, and did it. And you know, you're.
How long were you there for?
I lasted 8 months. I think I cracked after that.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of things that that happened, and it was a tough experience. And again, it makes you stronger. At the end of the day, I had no regrets because obviously I learned. Otherwise, it would be a waste of time. But yeah, you just get that layer of skin that not a lot of people get early on, and you're like, all right, I need to toughen the fuck up.
Yeah.
And then that ultimately you take that into your next job or several other jobs. But it was cool. It was cool seeing him 15 years later when I'm the pastry chef and he's trying my desserts and he's like, we're good, right?
That's funny, man.
I'm like, yes, chef, we're really good. Did you like the desserts? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
So did you go back to Chicago then after?
No, after that, it's when I got the bug to start traveling.
Yeah.
I did a stint I stayed in California. I did a stint at the Ritz-Carlton Half Moon Bay.
Oh,
just 'cause
great.
it was
Yeah,
super
great,
close.
great property. Man.
And I had some friends there. The exec chef there, Xavier Solomon, who I haven't spoken to in a little while, but have kept in touch with throughout the years. Amazing man. He was always anything you ever needed throughout your career. He was there. He's very well known, especially in the hotel industry in the U.S. And he would always bring chefs from abroad to the Half Moon Bay to do events. And he was also one of those people that said, you have to go. You have to travel. You need to go to France. You need to go to Spain. Or at the time, things were just starting to happen in Spain. So there's things you need to go to Japan. He was very encouraging of like, okay, you clearly love this. You have a little bit of talent. Like you need to travel. Like don't get stuck in a little fucking one road town in California and stay here for the next 5 years.
Right.
So I ended up staying in Half Moon Bay for almost 2.5 years. It was cool. I enjoyed it. I ultimately ended up working at a few hotels. That wasn't the path I was going to take to be a hotel pastry chef. I preferred restaurants.
Did you know that
restaurant
early?
Groups. No, I think I needed to go through a couple, and then also needed to see other things abroad to realize that wasn't the environment for me. I'm glad I did it. But again, you just start to meet people, even if it's one or two people that you take from each location that ultimately leave imprints on you. So Xavier was one of them, and he was very encouraging. And so the first time I ever left the country to go abroad was to go to Shanghai. And it was for that same reason, because I found a pastry chef there that I wanted to work for. At the time, he had a beautiful shop. Xavier knew who he was. He's like, yeah, fucking go.
Yeah.
Right at the time, I was sending emails like
Faxes.
No faxes.
No, I was sending faxes.
Email.
Dude.
I was sending a shit ton. I sent so many emails. It was hard for anybody to ignore me because they would have either they would say yes or they would say please stop emailing me. So that was
At least they responded.
That was my mindset. Like it could only be one or the other, right? So Eric Perez eventually said yes. Come on over. We'll take care of your visa. We'll pay you peanuts, which that's what it was.
Yeah.
But
literally peanuts.
But that was awesome, dude. Like it was too soon, I think, to go to Asia. Like I think it had ultimately probably
too much of a culture shock. Or?
No, I think it would have probably been better to have gone to Europe first, learn more, and then come back to Asia. I did things a little bit flipped around. So Shanghai was awesome though, because I always, since I was little, I did a lot of martial arts when I was younger. I was always very influenced by that part of the world, right? It was just so different, so mysterious. I loved the mantra of like everything that martial arts exuded, the discipline, the Buddhism, et cetera, the spirituality. I was doing a lot of Muay Thai when I was younger, a lot of grappling. So I always gravitated to that part of the world. I didn't know how much the food and the cuisines and the ingredients would ultimately play a role in my repertoire of desserts and my palate, but I knew that I wanted to go there. So when I found a chef that I wanted to ultimately work for because I admired him and he was in Shanghai, I was like, I gotta go to Shanghai.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Gotta go to fucking Shanghai.
Was your mom supportive of this or?
Yeah, she thought I was fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But she never said that to me. She never said you're stupid, you're crazy, don't do it. She's like, all right, if you think it's good, go for it.
Yeah.
Like that was it. And so that was just the right amount of encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't close with my dad, and I'm not to this day. But I always had her to push me,
Right.
To encourage me, to stick up for me. She's a very sweet woman, very affectionate woman, and had I not had that affection from her, I would ultimately be a very different person.
Sure, of course, yeah, yeah.
She's the biggest influence, in my life. From being a disciplined human being, in life, to pastry, to just having an open mind about the world. She's Latin American, and your typical Latin mom would stay within her little Latin circle. Probably wouldn't learn to speak English. Living in the U.S. Her friends would all be Latin. Her husband would only be Latin, and for some reason, my mom was a little bit different. She embraced culture in the U.S. She learned to speak English very early on, like fluently, perfectly. The food, embraced it. Made friends with all kinds of people from all over the world. Ultimately married a Polish American man who's an amazing person. My life, I think, would be very different if we stayed in that little, very Latin kind of bubble
in a corner of suburbs of Chicago. Yeah,
yeah, where the only people you surround yourself are Latins, and you're only speaking Spanish all day. And I'm glad at the same time that she forced me to speak Spanish. Like I ultimately learned to speak Spanish before English because even though I was born in the States, I grew up in Venezuela. I was there till I was about 6 or 7 years old.
Yeah.
So then coming back to the U.S., you speak Spanish. You have to go to ESL, and then all of a sudden, finally, at some point, English becomes your native tongue again. So you're speaking both languages, but we kind of got off track.
Yeah. What did you learn the most out of Shanghai? What did you take from it?
It wasn't pastry wise. We were doing nice stuff, very classic French stuff. Was
it boring to you at the time then?
No.
In the kitchen? No, just...
It wasn't boring because it was so challenging with
the language barrier. And I couldn't read anything.
So Eric wasn't always there. Eric had a shop in Bangkok at the time and Shanghai. So he was between the two places. So I would see him, some months I would see him for a week on, 2 weeks on. He was also traveling a lot all over Asia doing demos. So I was pretty much there with home team. And the pastry chef who was running it, she was a very sweet lady. Tracy spoke English. She had worked for Eric at the Ritz-Carlton Shanghai before, and so he brought her over. And I think there might have been one other young guy who spoke a bit of English. That was it. There were 30 Chinese people working in this between the bakery and the pastry side.
Jeez.
I was the first white guy that I ever had there. First Caucasian, first whatever foreigner,
first
like, non-Chinese speaking person. And they embraced me.
Yeah.
A couple of them I think wanted to kick my ass. Just to the way they would look at me, like, why are you here? Especially on the baking side, they were a little bit weird. Like the bakers are a little scary.
Yeah.
But for the most part, everyone embraced me like part of the family, and I learned to speak Mandarin fluently. No, amazing, no, but I can get by. I can go anywhere right now and hold a basic conversation in Mandarin. I can't write it, I can't read it, but I can speak because I just absorbed it. And kitchen Mandarin every day. I was around it every day, and I was forced to learn, and I fucking loved it. I would go to the markets on my days off, not even food markets, just fucking like flea markets, and just to practice Mandarin. Oh, can I buy this, or how much does this cost, or I'd like to try that, like stupid things. But you do that enough, it sticks, right?
And you figure it out. You know the mannerisms.
Yeah.
When I was in Spain learning Spanish, I knew, I would sometimes I just go to McDonald's and eat because I didn't have any money, and I knew the menu. But what I learned was the repetition of like, yo quiero una hamburguesa, blah, blah. And then I knew the next thing they were going to ask was, what kind of drink do you want?
That's crucial. The next thing's always crucial.
The next thing is like, what kind of drink do you want?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, oh, I'd like a Coke. And there would be like, para llevar. So I would learn, llevar means to go, key. And I would learn Spanish that way. The problem I get hung up on is if they didn't follow that same format. Like,
that twist.
You want a hamburger? Okay, what else do you want? A Coke. Okay, what else do you want besides Coke? For here.
How do you want to cook?
Yeah, does anyone want to cook? How do you want to cook?
Wait,
what? Yeah, you told me you want it here already, but I was like, I don't know what I'm doing,
Yeah.
So I think that's like the evolution of like being in another country and doing the day-to-day of like going to the pastry shop and like buying this, and you're going to get this much change back, and they're going to say this, they're going to ask you how your day was. It's very scripted. you know?
And I think that was probably what I loved most about my experience there. That every day was going to be a challenge, but every day was going to be interesting. And I remember
To say the
during
least, right?
I remember summertime we would I think it was the old Ritz-Carlton in Shanghai used to do an open air market. It was mostly like food, bakery, but then also you had like artisans doing stuff. So every Sunday we would pack up a bunch of viennoiserie, a bunch of pastries, eclairs, and go to the Ritz-Carlton for this Sunday market thing. And that was like the only time I got to see foreigners like that spoke English. Because we were at the Ritz-Carlton, so you're like, oh wow, I remember how to speak English.
Yeah.
But it was cool. Like they were amazing people. They were beautiful people. They embraced me. They wanted me to always try. You know, they would always sit down. We'd always sit down together at the bread table and have lunch. And they were always giving me their food. And sometimes I'd be like, no, thank you. And other times I'd be like, fuck yeah, I want to taste that.
Still moving.
And it was also the first and only time I've gotten really sick abroad, being in Shanghai, like being too eager to try all the amazing looking, smelling street food, which you don't realize at the time is probably going in oil that's
Gutter grease. Yeah.
It's like the fifth use, and they bought it from a restaurant that sold it to them, who then sold it to another restaurant, and that guy on the street's like the fifth person using that oil.
Yeah, man, it's pretty sketchy.
It's the first and only time. I think my stomach's probably like gone through so much crap living abroad, man, that I'm like nothing phases me anymore. But yeah, like I remember going to work one day. I think I had like gotten some Chinese pancakes on the street the night before, something. And the next day, like I remember the guys walking over to me, and Eric was in town that week. Like, you okay? You look a little pale. I was like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Green.
And I had like no energy, like was not responsive. And Eric's like told one of the assistants in I think the office, like, can you please take him to the hospital?
The hospital. We don't need this kid to die here.
And so I remember going to the hospital and like being hooked up to an IV and just sleeping it off for like 48 hours.
Yeah.
And then coming back like, oh yeah, that was a good idea. Thanks, chef. I
got food poisoning in Korea one time. It was the scariest fucking thing, man.
Oh, yeah?
I had left Bangkok to meet my friend Christian. He was doing a dinner, and I landed. It was a long flight. I took a whole bunch of Xanax, but I ate at the Bangkok airport in like the what is it, the members lounge, whatever, where the priority pass, wherever I was, and I was like eating like dumplings and stuff. I don't know why. And had a gin and tonic, and I was just looking. I'm like, this stuff's been out here for a long time. It was like 12:30. You know, all those flights in Asia, they're all at night. Yeah. Also, you can't take like 12:30. It was like 12:30 at night. There's nobody there, and I'm eating like shrimp shumai. Like looking back is like
bad idea.
Such a bad idea.
Especially when you're getting on like a 12 or 14 hour flight.
Yeah, I don't remember how long it was. It was a long flight, way longer than I wanted it to be. I don't think it was like 5 hours or 6 hours.
Especially if you're uncomfortable.
Yeah. So I took a whole bunch of sleeping pills, and they were still like, I got off the flight and I was still like fucked up in a daze, and I got on a bus to take me to the hotel, and I was still sleeping. The bus driver had to wake me up, and my room wasn't ready, and I met Christian there. We had a couple coffees, and then I met him at the hotel, and then I was like, I don't feel well, and I was like, I'll just go take a nap. And I woke up, and it was like the bed was just like soaked. I was just like sweating. And I was crawling around, and I was supposed to go to dinner. I was supposed to go to dinner that night, and I call him like, dude, I don't think I can make it to dinner.
It's not a fun feeling.
I don't think I can make it to dinner. And then he calls me after the dinner, and I'm like, I was like shaking, you know, and I was just landed in fucking Seoul, Korea. I had no idea where anything was, and I was trying to find like a 7-Eleven to get a Gatorade. I was just walking around up and down hills, and there was no Google Maps, so I couldn't even map anything out. I was like fucked. I was fucked, man. I didn't know anybody. I was staying in an Airbnb. I wasn't even staying in a hotel. I was in an Airbnb. And then he calls me, and I'm like, I need to go to the hospital. So the chef, Sung, came and picked me up and took me to the hospital, and they gave me an IV, and I was like, oh my God.
And it's always a weird experience, and it's eye-opening when you go to hospitals in other countries.
No one spoke a fucking lick of English, man.
And sometimes the hospitals they exceed what you thought it was going to be, and they're like a million miles better than what you saw in the States, and sometimes they're scary as
fuck. Dude, it was a fucking hard 28 hours, man.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It was very bad food poisoning. Like, normally, like, oh, I got food poisoning.
But
like,
have you ever gotten sick since?
Food poisoning?
Yeah, since that time?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, it was 2019.
Yeah, I think I put enough like
you're
street
right.
food and crap food in my body in my time in Asia that I mean,
Well, every time I go to Asia, you always have to get adjusted. You get like Bali belly or something. It's just like
Bali
a little,
belly?
yeah. But it's like the food poisoning there. It's not really food poisoning,
Yeah.
but you just get like sick. You take some charcoal pills, and like the next day you're fine. It's not food poisoning. It's just like getting accustomed to the
Yeah.
bacteria that's on the other side of the planet.
Okay.
Or if you're a flat earther, the other side of the way. You know. Where were we?
we were in Shanghai.
Shanghai.
So no,
After Shanghai.
yeah,
We were having food poisoning in Shanghai.
we
yeah.
were, but no, all was good after that. Ultimately, I knew that if I loved being in China, and I loved when I got to travel a little bit. So I'm like, wow, I love this part of the world. But I also realized if I stay here now and don't go other places to get more training and learn from the people that are doing really interesting things in the world, I might just be an okay pastry chef here. Like I might get some jobs and
Were you considering staying there?
no, but I had a hard time leaving Shanghai because I knew that I was gonna miss it a lot, and I did. Like I was really sad the day I left Shanghai, and the reason I left was because I had an opportunity to go to some like what would be my first Michelin experience in Europe. I mean, complete change of landscape and culture. Right?
Yeah,
You're going from
yeah.
Shanghai where nobody speaks English, going to Oslo to your first one Michelin star, very French kitchen. I wasn't excited to go to Oslo. It was just that, I have this opportunity to go to a Michelin star restaurant.
How did you get like
Again, like people's footprints.
Shanghai to Oslo? That's
So
fucking whack,
when I
dude.
was in Half Moon Bay, a pastry chef, he didn't come on board as the pastry chef. This French guy came on board as I think sous chef. They ultimately never put a pastry chef there with him, and he was pretty much running the show. And I think he got tired, and he ended up taking this pastry chef position in Oslo at this one star, which I didn't realize until I got to Oslo that at the time it was actually a really big deal in the Scandinavian food scene. It was called Bagatelle. The Mr. Hellstrom, the chef proprietor of the restaurant, was very much involved in Bocuse d'Or. Mm-hmm. He was one of the head judges at Bocuse d'Or, always for Norway. He was always coaching the Norwegian candidates. Our chef de cuisine at the time was a Swedish guy that placed, I think, second at one of the Bocuse d'Ors. So all of a sudden, it was a very French but very hardcore kitchen with a lot of very ambitious people wanting to do a lot of big things. And in Scandinavia at the time, bagatelle was like the thing.
Yeah.
Very French, but really beautiful, So ultimately I went there because this guy from Half Moon Bay reached out and we talked and was like, yeah, I want a Michelin experience. And he's like, well, come on over. No visa.
You just show up,
dude.
Yeah, it's
that
Scandinavian,
story of
man.
my stage year life. So I get to Oslo. I pretty much overstay my visa. I'm illegal at this point. I'm getting paid like an envelope full of cash once a month. I've have these two roommates, these two Norwegian women. One is in the military. One is like a professional snowboarder. Like so random. I work with a bunch of French dudes and a bunch of Norwegians. One Swedish guy, and I'm the only. Obviously the only American, the only Spanish-speaking one. I felt so out of place, and I never felt at home there. It was a cool experience, but it was a very lonely time in my life.
Yeah. Very
lonely. Like, yeah, you kick it with the people in the kitchens, but you never feel like those people are going to be your friends. And,
Right.
I think I enjoyed my time in Scandinavia, especially Denmark, but Norwegians, obviously amazing people, but also it's not easy to get into their circle. They're very cold initially, and I felt as a foreigner it was also because we had a lot of French people in the kitchen and the front of the house, so you were either with the Frenchies or you were with the Norwegians,
Right.
And I didn't feel like I was either, so it was a really lonely time, man. Winters were dark as hell.
I get it. Yeah.
It was it was a really cool experience. It opened up other doors.
The winters are tough, man.
I remember I would walk to work every day. So I had about a 20-minute walk every day. And in winter, like,
it's like fucking
it's not
dark,
easy.
Man.
But again, it shapes you. You forget the bad, you take the good, and there's a couple good memories from that I'll always keep with me. And it was cool.
When did you get to El Bulli?
So I had no plans of leaving Oslo. It was just kind of like, all right, do your time here, and this might. What I think I really wanted to do was go to France from there. think that like
I'm surprised it took you that long to get to France.
Well, I never worked in France. I ended up working with a lot of French people.
Yeah.
I never worked in France, and I think at that time I was obsessed with the Trois Gros brothers.
Yeah.
And for some reason I had it in my head like, oh, I want to go work for either Michel Bras or the Trois Gros brothers. And actually, Mr. Hellstrom, the chef of Bagatelle, was very well connected because he had worked for Bocuse and the Trois Gros. So he actually offered to like send me there. But then all of a sudden, backstory, while I was there for months, I had been writing to El Bulli, like letter after letter, email after email. And it was only because I had like one small connection from the French pastry school to Albert Adria that for some reason that like that got filtered through in the email, and that was like, oh, green light, okay, he's in.
Yeah.
That got me in. Like, you know, very grateful. I don't think if it hadn't been for the French pastry school, would I have been able to land in El Bulli. So all of a sudden, it's like winter. I think it was just before Christmas closure of the restaurant in Norway. I check my email, and you know, Spanish email, an email in Spanish saying, congratulations, you've been accepted to as a stagiaire for the next upcoming season of El Bulli. A really long document, you know, that you send out to everyone. And I reread it a couple times. I'm like, is this real? Spam. Check my spam.
Yeah.
It's like, it was one of those moments where I didn't have anybody to share it with, so I was just kind of looking around the room like, holy fuck. Because obviously Albert at the time was starting to make waves.
He's the fucking man, dude.
But I thought I had zero chance. So like it wasn't a thought like I sent a bunch of letters, a bunch of emails, and I'm like, all right, there's no way I'm getting in. So, you know, that's when I was kind of planning. I'm like, oh, yeah, I want to go to France. And all of a sudden I see this email in the middle of winter. And I had to tell my pastry chef, hey, I got in. He's like, yeah, you have to go. So it was about, I think it was like 4 months later. So I did a couple more months at Bagatelle. And, you know, no one's going to be mad at you for going to El Bulli.
Yeah,
obviously.
seriously, yeah.
And fucking get on a flight. What did I didn't go straight to Rosas. I think I went from like Oslo to Lisboa, Portugal. I had a friend there.
To where?
Lisbon.
Yeah.
But he was living in some like little beach town in Portugal. He was a chef as well that I knew from Half Moon Bay. So I was like, hey, can I come kick it for like a week? You know, I have like a week before I need to go to El Bulli. He's like,
Half Moon Bay opened a lot of doors for you.
Yeah, man. Like a lot of really cool people that I still keep in touch with from time to time. So I went to stay with my buddy, Peter, who's at the time, I think he was the exec chef of the Ritz-Carlton in, not Lisbon. It was this very beautiful little estate outside of Lisbon. And he's like, yeah, I'm on holiday right now with my wife, but here, I'll leave the keys for you. Go chill at my apartment. I'm like, okay.
Sick.
So I spent a week by myself in this little Kachkai, a little beach town outside of Lisbon.
It's amazing going from like the cold tundra of Oslo to like landing in Lisbon on the beach.
I think
it
was exactly what I needed.
Yeah.
I was alone, but I didn't care. I went to the beach every day. I soaked up sun that I was missing. I felt a little bit healthier, a little bit better, a little bit more color on my a little bit more pigment.
That happened to me. I was working at Beresategi for like, I think it was like maybe 2 months, maybe under 2 months.
Yeah.
It was like raining and cold and miserable, and I hated it. And then I jumped on a plane with the Barcelona with the Roca brothers, and it was like amazing and fun and sun, and I was like, oh, this is fucking what I need right now, man. Yeah.
So no, I did that for a week, and then I got on another plane, went to Barcelona, figured out how to get to Rosas, you know, train, then a bus.
Easy. Yeah, it's easy enough, right? Yeah.
It's easy, but it's daunting when you're
you gotta like 22
years old, 23 years old, whatever.
Checking your ticket to make sure you're on the right train.
Yeah, you don't have internet on your phone at this point, right? So it's like, this is the paper, don't lose it or you're fucked. This is how you get from A to B.
Yeah.
And I remember getting to Rosas a day too early. I got there the day before they were gonna allow the stagiaires into their housing.
Yeah.
So I was like tired as fuck at this point. It was a long day of travel. I get to Rosas. It's like 6 p.m. And I think I called. There was a number to call. When I think it was one of the chefs. He was already at El Bulli. And I'm like, hey, I'm here. And where do I go? Like, oh, no, you're not supposed to be here till tomorrow. It's like, fuck me. So I went into this little bar, got a coffee at like 7 p.m. I'm like, do you guys know anywhere where I could stay for a night?
Yeah, is there any hotels?
Somebody at the bar was super nice, was a taxi driver. And I think they felt bad for me, and I looked very lost. And he actually took me to like a little hostel or like a really cheap little hotel in Rosas. And he's like, yeah, it's good, it's safe, you can stay here. It was like probably $20 for the night or something. So stayed there that night. And I remember the gentleman, I asked him like, hey, could you pick me up tomorrow? You know, obviously I pay you and take me up to Kalamanjoy, the where El Bulli was. And that next morning he came to pick me up. Didn't think he was actually going to show up.
Yeah.
Drops me off, and that's where that part of my life started. And those were ultimately, I went back a couple seasons as well later. Like the next 2-3 seasons, I would always come back for a couple of weeks because Albert was super gracious. And you know, with open arms. Yeah, of course, you did your time with us. You can come back whenever you want.
That's
like
dope, yeah.
for whatever time you want, for how long you want. You know, a week or 2 weeks, whatever. Those were a magical 6 months of my life. You know, I met some amazing people that have gone on to be like world-class chefs that are super well known. Like, but more than that, it opens up it was the kind of experience that opens up your eyes to not what is being done with food, but what could be done with food.
Yeah.
It taught you.
There's no
It's
boundaries.
weird to say it taught you creativity, because I don't think creativity is something that you can ultimately teach. It's something you could be an amazing artisan. You could be super disciplined. It doesn't mean you're creative, but that place just breeded creativity. It in every facet, in every corner of that kitchen, from the chef speaking to watching Ferran at his table, writing down things. You couldn't help but just be surrounded by magic. It was magical. That's the best way to describe it. And I think, to be honest, I think you and I talked about this from people we've spoken to from their experiences at El Bulli, and obviously me being there. The two best parts to be in were the Cuarto Frío, the cold room, and pastry, because you were exposed to the most amount of techniques, ingredients,
dishes.
It was fun. There was a lot of dishes. For those two corners, which were right by each other, were the best part of that kitchen. And then you had the big ass communal table, and where everyone's just kind of peeling nuts all day about things that needed to get done. But you ultimately, if you got lucky enough to be in pastry or the cold room, you were gonna have probably a better 6 months than someone else.
Sure.
And it was magical, man. Every day was awesome. Every day was. Albert was in the kitchen still, and just like the moments you got to interact with him and just seeing him, like his eyes light up when he got an idea.
Yeah.
Or like, I remember he came in one day. He's like, I think it was Pan's Labyrinth, that movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
He's like, I watched Pan's Labyrinth. I'm like, yeah? I'm going to make a dessert. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, there's this rose at the end. The petals fall off. We're going to make a dessert. I was like, the fuck are you smoking, man?
Yeah, right.
And then he starts getting into the whole genre of like the mimetic. He was the OG mimetic. Everyone now fucking making apples, and dude, Albert Adler was the OG of all the things mimetic, right? And that's when that kick started. That was right before he started to put out those kinds of desserts the season I was there, that ultimately led to him making the Natura book, which basically struck this whole revolution of fucking mimetic fruit and food and shit. But just to see him like geek out and have fun and create,
have an idea and see that idea come to life.
Yeah, and it was so different than like, so Matteo is the pastry chef, amazing dude. Like, I've never seen anybody run a tighter kitchen. He had a hotel background, kitchen savory background, but he got put into pastry, so he ran that in a very structured, very like no corner, no leaf will be unturned. Like, everything was dissected. Like, everything had to be exactly the way it was for service to go as smooth as it did, and for all the mise en place to go as smooth as it was, and to also just babysit 5 stars years plus a chef de partie.
Yeah, right.
Like, the dude was fucking, I've never seen anybody more disciplined in my life. Like, the guy was a fucking machine. That's so much. And now he's one of the chef owners of Disfrutar.
Yeah, he is. That's right. That's where he's.
But Matteo is an amazing guy to be able to work for. Like, I love this guy. I have so much respect for him. So it was really cool because you had Matteo one side, and then you had Alberto, just kind of like happy-go-lucky. And you'd always see Matteo like writing down, okay, what's Alberto doing? Because that was ultimately gonna
be his.
That was gonna land on him. So he's
like,
like, he'd be talking, he'd be like, hold on, what's he doing? Okay.
Like, here's the dish. Now make it.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. That was really, it was magical, man.
Yeah.
Like, there wasn't, I know there was a lot of people cooks that went through those kitchens that didn't have a good experience, didn't enjoy it. For me, it was one of the best times of my life.
Yeah, but it's like, it's a very personal thing, not enjoying something. You got to be in the right headspace.
Yeah.
It's not what you thought. I think a lot of times, especially those big restaurants in Europe, you want to romanticize about the cookbook, and you want to romanticize that, Albert's going to come behind you and take your hand and show you how to, temper chocolate. And when you get there and you realize that this is a fucking factory and there's 60 fucking people just like you,
And it's a business. That
and
needs
it's a
to run.
business, and shit's got to get done, and you're not the best cook in the kitchen. You might have been like the number one guy at your restaurant somewhere, the bistro you worked at.
That was also the first time where you get there and everyone takes a step back to be a stage, and you realize, oh, there's some badasses.
There's
here.
some badass motherfuckers
There's
here, man.
everyone here, not everyone, but I would say like in that kitchen at that time,
It gets sorted out fast.
80%, it gets filtered very quickly,
and
and if the ones that aren't good stick around, they end up fucking making family meal.
Right.
And so you're surrounded by 80% of the people there that are solid. They're really solid cooks, or they're really fucking good.
Yeah.
And so that pushes you to be better, or everything's about who you surround yourself with, right? So if you surround yourself by amazing chefs, you're ultimately going to be an amazing chef. If you surround yourself by people that are financially gurus, or they're millionaires, or they've been very successful entrepreneurs, well, you're going to absorb that too. Everything.
But also, if you're surrounding yourself with negative people, you shouldn't do that. You can't do that. Or you surround yourself with people that are like, dude, you need to fucking go do this, man. You need to go see the world. You need to like get serious about what you're doing. Go see the world and become a great fucking person.
It's like so important ultimately to realize you're a sponge, but what you absorb and who you absorb it from is so important.
It's such a human trait though. Like, I don't understand why it's so easy to go negative. It's so easy to have a negative mentality. It's almost comforting at times. And it takes such an effort to like reach out your hand to help somebody, to like take a moment to like, have a conversation with someone, take a moment to like well wish someone, but it's so easy to be like, fuck that guy, or be jealous, or, they don't deserve that. It's such a human thing. I don't understand why,
I don't know. I mean, I've come across that a lot as well.
Yeah. Because helping, it just makes you feel so good. Like helping somebody, or like leaving your day knowing that you made a difference in someone's life. You know, it's such a good feeling. But it's so easy. It's so easy to get 4 people in a room, and one person's positive and the other 3 are negative, and then within minutes that fourth person's be like, yeah, you know what? You guys are right. Fuck this place, man. It's like a cancer. It's weird.
Toxic.
It's toxic. It's weird. I wonder why that is, man. It's a human trait.
And all you can do is
rise above it.
Be smart enough to realize very quickly that no, that's not what I want, and I need to get far away from it as possible.
But it takes time to like,
because like you said, it's easy to just go with the masses.
Yeah.
Oh, all these people are saying this. I should just go with them and say this.
But it takes time to figure out who you are as a person.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not something that ever ends. I feel like I got a really great handle on who I am and where I'm at, and I'm comfortable with what I'm doing, and I'm comfortable in my own skin, and I'm very comfortable cooking the food that we're cooking now, and I'm happy doing it. It's very casual, and people love it, but I'm not stopping there. I'm not saying, okay, everything's going well, I'm comfortable. It's like I need to keep pushing myself to do more. I need to like have more outlets of creativity. I need to have more outlets of discipline. I need, just not in the kitchen, just like jiu-jitsu is great, but I also do yoga to keep the mind at ease. And I also work out so my bones don't shatter when I'm, 80 years old. And, I eat right. I don't know. There's all these things that I'm constantly doing. It's nice to get to a place and say, I just climbed this fucking mountain for the last 3 years to open this restaurant. And we're doing well. I got Matthew. We're doing well. We're working well. We're making money. It's profitable. The staff's happy. It's very easy for me just to sit down and be like, yeah, okay, cool. Let's just coast now. And it's not how we look at it. It's, great. That was yesterday. What are we doing today? The success was yesterday. The failure was yesterday. Yeah. What does today look like? I'm not riding the success of yesterday into today, and I'm not carrying the failure of yesterday into today, even though sometimes I do, and I'm working on it. But yesterday's yesterday. Today's today. What are we doing? I don't know. Just constantly keep pushing. I feel like you're the same way, too. You're always seeking, always out there looking for new information, always trying to better yourself.
I think it's also that chasing wonder maybe it sounds too childish,
And I think I'm just a very curious person.
but yeah, it's curiosity, you know, and always, yeah, being curious to see what else, not only kitchen, but like and just in life, what else am I capable of?
Mm-hmm.
What else is out there? What else do I still need to live and discover? Who else? Maybe it's a who, maybe it's a person. And I think there's something beautiful and scary about that, to not get complacent, not just get comfortable and be like, oh yeah, this is a good life. Just gonna chill here and
I'm just
coast.
gonna chill, yeah, you know. Oh, it's okay for like a day or two. Like, oh
Yeah.
fuck, I had a hard week.
And,
like,
and for a lot of people that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that.
right.
But that for people like you and me, I think that it's that never ending kind of like quest. And it might not be ever be something that you ultimately find, but it might always be searching a little bit more, digging a little bit more, wondering a little bit more, and having those experiences, having those footprints, meeting those people. And
Is the secret to life just constant side missions?
I don't know, man.
Like we're on this game of life, this video game of life, and the side missions are what makes life interesting.
I don't know. So one thing though that I have realized as I've gotten older is, and I've left behind so much of like materialistic things, material possessions. I need so much less now to be content or happy. Like things like tangible objects in my life that I find value in, or that I'm like, oh wow, I'm taking that with me. There are very few now.
Yeah,
Very, very few. I live more for the experiences
definitely.
than the moment, or like, oh, I need to have the best this or the car or the whatever. I could literally pick up and go tomorrow to wherever, you know, back to Shanghai, and I would probably be able to fit my life in 2
In a
suitcases.
backpack. Yeah, right.
Maybe not a backpack, maybe a
Well,
small
yeah,
luggage.
but I mean, what else do you need? Like, yeah,
You know,
what else do you need?
I would have.
You need your knife pack and some fucking pants.
You know, it's funny. Like, this is completely off topic. One of my favorite books, and again, if I read a book, it's because I got really engaged, because I don't have the attention span to read, unless it's like food science stuff, or now like crypto, or something motivational. But one of my favorite books it's a book called Shantaram. They made a Apple series on it about a year ago. It's based on true story. There's obviously things have been changed a little bit, but ultimately the gist of it is this dude that he's a convict in Australia. He's Australian. He escapes prison and flees to India. Why India? I'm not sure. I think somebody like there was a flight or a train or something. I don't know. But he gets a fake ID made. Somebody owed him a favor, like that he went to prison for, gave him some money, and these things actually happened to him. And he ends up in India with a backpack. And the rest of the story, the book is beautiful. It's about his time in India, how he perceived India, him having to work illegally as an Australian dude. But one of the lines that in the beginning of the book, or the series, if you watch it, he talks about how he literally packed up his life in a backpack, and all the objects and all the things in the world that he held precious, he could literally hold within 2 hands. Mm-hmm. And when he got there, he took them out, kind of like a chef, unpacked his things, lined them all up beautifully, and as if that was a shrine to his life. And those things, like if anybody he could have $5 in his wallet, but if anybody touched any of those things,
yeah, right,
they were gonna fucking lose.
Yeah, I get it.
And I feel like I feel a lot like that. Like there's very few things I hold tangible that I'm like, this brings value to me in my life,
mm-hmm.
and I don't want to live without it. There's very few things, and it took me a long time to get to that point, I think.
Yeah, but you're there now. And looking back, does it seem like not it was all for nothing, but not you didn't waste time? Because I feel like everything that you do gets you to the point where you're at. Like people say, like the phrase, you know, the experience makes the person who you are. You know, the reason you had that bad experience, it makes you who you are. It's like, I don't necessarily know if it makes you the person. Like having the experience makes who you are. I think the experience gives you insight and intuition and knowledge of how to make better decisions moving forward. So I think like you had a bad experience at one thing. Let's just say you had a bad experience something. You're going into it, you see the bad experience coming because you know you're a little bit more crisp on the way that you think.
You're a little bit more sensitive.
You're a little more sensitive. You're a little more aware.
Attuned to what's going on.
Aware of what's going on. So I don't necessarily believe if like, oh, everything happens. Everything happens for a reason. That's the line. Everything happens for a reason. It's like, and it makes you the person who you are now. It's like yes and no. Everything happens for a reason, but it doesn't. I don't think the reason makes you the person that you are now. I think the reason gives you the tools to make better decisions on what's going on. Like you see red flags coming, and you're like, you know what? I know what that is. I'm not going to go down there. You see, something else happens, and I've been in this situation before, and this is what I did last time, so I'm going to do this instead. I'm going to get a better result.
It's almost like, and
Does that make sense? Does it make any sense?
It does,
Yeah.
and I think I guess the way that I can rationalize that, and again, it goes back to this commonality that you and I have had, that we've seeked out those experiences, lived a million more lives than most people,
Yeah.
and although I kind of look at that as like it was training. It was all training. It was all being in the battlefield, not necessarily for the good, but ultimately it armed you, it equipped you, it gave you the armor, how you chose to deal with the situations, to then later on not need it, but know how to react. Like
Right.
there's a quote. You and I talked about this the other day. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
In a war, right?
I'd
Yeah,
rather
that's
be
a great
I'd
quote.
rather be at peace, but to have all these experiences and knowledge
Right.
and like layers of armor should I ever need it. But I hope that I don't need it, because I'm at a place now where I know you're ultimately a better person. You know what you want and you know how to react to situations.
Right.
As opposed to going through life never having gone through shitty experiences, never having hurt people or gotten hurt, never had any of that. You don't know what repercussions are. You could be 40, 50 years old, and all of a sudden now you're making the decisions a 20-year-old would have made.
Right.
So yeah, I'd rather be a warrior in a garden.
Yeah.
than
I
a
don't know. I
gardener
don't know
in
if
a
it
war.
was Bruce Lee or Hickson Gracie, or it might have been one of the Gracies that said.
Could have just been Joe Rogan.
Could have just been Joe Rogan. It's like I do jujitsu, so I don't have to do jujitsu.
Yes.
I practice jujitsu, so I don't ever have to use it in real life.
Yeah.
Because it's like that confidence knowing you can diffuse a situation, but it's also the confidence knowing you're never going to get yourself into that situation.
It's funny. A lot of people that have done martial arts for a long time, they've never gotten into a fight.
No, because you diffuse the situation.
Yeah,
man,
because you actually fear getting into a fight. And I remember when I was training a lot, that back, it was like a 5-year spurt where I was like hardcore Muay Thai and like submission grappling. And no one ever, and this was, that started in high school and later on when I lived in Asia as well. But in high school specifically, like I went to a very diverse high school. We had kids from all over, lots of different personalities. Fights were always breaking out. There was always the badasses, the guys that were, your crew on the football team.
The jocks,
your wrestlers.
Uh-huh.
But then you also
The
had guys
wrestlers,
who weren't jocks, but were the gangsters, right? And it was really funny because in high school, like, I know we're getting off subject, but I wrestled and I did a lot of martial arts. And I trained at this very kind of underground Muay Thai school that at the time, it wasn't a franchise. It was like, they were the only ones doing Muay Thai in Illinois. They were the first ones that were bringing in like Japanese submission wrestling. And a lot of these guys from high school, some of them were actually on the wrestling team with me. Some of them were just like badasses, like hardcore at school, didn't give a fuck about anything, but they also trained. So it was really funny because I kind of got initiated into that. Like, all right, cool. Because I never picked, I didn't look for trouble. I was very quiet. I kept to myself. Had obviously my group of friends. I never acted like a badass. But being in that group of like, oh, you're cool with the wrestlers, but you're also cool with the martial arts crew that they're like gangsters, but they respect you because you fucking spar and fight and roll with them all the time. Yeah. So when I was at school, like nobody fucked with me. Not because not because they thought, oh, he's a badass. It's just there was respect from all sides.
Right.
And I kind of always wanted to get into a fight. It never happened to this day.
It's probably better.
But at the same time, I'm like, because I'm a very emotional person, I'm like, if I have to use, and I think Muay Thai is a very practical, extremely practical street fight martial art. I think I also got scared. Like, man, maybe if I start fucking elbowing someone,
you could really fucking hurt.
I might not be able to stop.
Yeah.
And I don't want to inflict that on somebody.
Yeah.
And now it's been years since I trained, and I think I'd like to get back into Muay Thai. I'm not gonna do BJJ like you, but the Muay Thai I I really loved it.
Well, you're headed to Hong Kong, right?
Yeah,
There's some great fucking jiu-jitsu schools in Hong Kong too.
There's some good MMA schools in
Great,
Hong Kong.
yeah. So what are you gonna do in Hong Kong?
So one of my closest friends, Vicky Chang, he has a beautiful 1-star in Hong Kong. We've done events together in the past. We were, oh man, I'll tell you about Vicky first. So Vicky's got a 1-star Michelin there. He's classically French trained, but he's Cantonese, right? So he's done this really beautiful job of reintroducing forgotten Cantonese, Chinese recipes, ingredients, giving them French technique or modern technique. Not crazy. Like there's no gimmicks. It's just beautiful food that's creative. But like, it's like opening up a cookbook from like 200 years ago, and like bringing out a sea cucumber and bringing out like these herbs that nobody knows what the fuck is in China anymore, and saying I'm gonna make Michelin cuisine with it, and doing it in a beautiful and educational and delicious way. Vicky's done really well for himself. Now he has a Chinese restaurant now as well, and he's got a couple other things going on. So ultimately, I'm gonna be joining him in Hong Kong.
Sick, man.
To kind of do pastry for his group, and there's some other projects I'm not gonna talk about that are in the pipeline with him. But Vicky's a great guy. I've done pop-ups with him at his restaurant. Him and I did Art Basel Miami, which was a fucking trip before COVID. I think it was like a year or two before COVID. It was one of the Art Basel Miami events. So with this woman who I met in Korea at an event, who lived in Los Angeles, who's a florist, somehow organizes events abroad. She reaches out to me. She's like, "Hey, do you want to come do Art Basel Miami?" I'm like, "Sure, but I want to bring a chef along." She's like, "Yeah, we need to do sweet and savory." I had no fucking idea what I was getting myself into. So I reached out to Vicky. I'm like, "Hey, you want to do this with me?" Like, I was living in Japan at the time. Like, "Vicky, you want to go do this with me? Like, they're paying pretty decent, and like, it's Art Basel. Why not, right? Like, we get flown out there. You can bring an assistant. I can bring an assistant, and we're gonna have everything we need, right?" So I have no
Famous last words.
So what we were gonna do, we were there to create a cerebral dining experience with artists. So we had, it was one of those experiences where like music was being played throughout courses. There were projections on screens. We had this amazing performer. I don't even know what the hell you would call him. Like doing all kinds of weird things with his body, but also putting on skits. That was one of the courses.
Jesus.
We had one room before people went into the dining room. We set up like an edible room. So like some of his savory food was like literally like you'd go into like the bushes and you'd like start to pick something and eat it, you know, a mushroom, whatever. I had like collages of hanging like candies and pastries that looked like massive origami flowers, and in the center of the flower was this little like fucking snowball.
Yeah, that's dope,
That the end was beautiful. The prelude to that was a fucking nightmare. So we get to Miami. We're fucking jet lag as fuck. We're both coming from Asia. My assistant Kaylin was coming from Melbourne. Next day they're like, "Okay, we're gonna pick you up at the hotel." The lady was staying at the hotel with her entourage. We're gonna take you to the kitchen that we've rented out for you to do your prep. We get there. It's not a kitchen. It's like an empty warehouse that does fucking raves that had a kitchen. So it's like, all right, it's not the end of the world as long as we have our stuff, and we're gonna have refrigerated trucks and we could ingredients. We could make it happen. We get there, she's waiting for us. She's like, "We got a problem." I'm like, "What do you mean? What's the problem?" He's like, "Yeah, they won't let us in. They won't let us use the facility. They thought we were here for something else. Like it was something shady was going on. We didn't get the full story, but ultimately we were hanging around for 2 hours because we couldn't use that kitchen. So now we're like, you know, we're doing this big ass fucking event in like 3 days, two or 3 days from that. So that day, all of us go back to the hotel. Essentially, we lose a day of prep.
Yeah,
and she's trying to figure out where the fuck we're gonna prep.
Wow, man.
So somehow she reached out to some people in a catering company that she knew from LA that had connections in Miami, and we get a makeshift catering kitchen that is in it almost looked like a storage unit. Not your ideal situation, but okay, it was a kitchen-ish. We go in there, we prep. Fucking kitchen catches on fire. So we have to get out of the kitchen Not to the point where a
Holy
part of it,
shit, man.
we had to go in there like fucking, fire extinguishers,
Yeah.
police come, everything. Kill a couple hours over time, but like Vicky and I are looking at each other like, is this really fucking happening? Like it's hot as fuck.
dude.
We're like in aprons and shorts because it's just
it's
you're
Miami.
sweating your
Yeah,
balls
right.
off literally trying to prep. Dude, we ended up prepping there for 2 days somehow. We had this catering company step in and help us, luckily, because we would have been fucked. Then the night before we go to the actual event space, which is not a kitchen, we're literally setting up like makeshift refrigerators, speed racks, fold out tables, making them into a kitchen. Like the whole time we're just those kinds of moments where you look at each other and you're like fuck, but you got to keep moving.
Christ, man.
And then ultimately the fucking thing like goes off without a hitch. And at the end of the night we were exhausted. We sat down for some food. They ordered us food, and we all look at each other like,
Let's get
good
the fuck out of here.
fucking job. Let's go back to the hot
right.
tub. It was funny because that trip, the hot tub was our thing every night. Like we were so pissed off at the world. Like, let's go into the jacuzzi, and we would all just kind of drink a glass of champagne. And
That's smart.
And again, you don't really remember the bad. It's fun to talk about it, but at the end, it was like, fuck, that was really cool.
Yeah.
We got to fucking cook at Art Basel Miami. We had some artists there with us doing some shit. That was cool. So, anyways, yeah, Vicky and I shared a lot of experiences like that, and so when the opportunity came up to be able to do something with him in Hong Kong,
Okay. And you leave in a couple weeks, no?
a couple months.
Yeah, a couple months. All right.
I spent a lot of time in Asia. I always felt a lot more comfortable there than I did in the U.S. Hong Kong in particular. I lived in Tokyo, I lived in Singapore, I traveled all over Asia for work. Hong Kong, for some reason, was always a place that stayed very near my heart.
Yeah.
I always felt more at home there than I have in most places of the world. I still, to this day, have very good friends from the culinary world, from the CrossFit world. Like that's where I really kind of like went gung ho on CrossFit. I lived there twice, and I always lived in the same neighborhood. So like I could literally close my eyes and I can walk around the neighborhood Shenwen where I lived, and I could tell you all my spots. I could tell you
that's great.
where I would go once a week to get my my red bean pancake that I fucking loved. That I was the only white guy buying those at this local bakery. I knew where to go for my coffee because there's some good coffee roasters. I knew where to go to this hole in the wall Thai place where you could get the most amazing papaya salad and fucking whole roasted fish for like $8.
Yeah.
That only locals would go to, or like food geeks. So that all like when I think of Hong Kong, I think of something very familiar to me, more so than being in fucking Illinois or Chicago.
It's crazy, man.
And it's crazy that the places that can be so foreign to somebody else could feel so like home to you.
Welcoming, yeah.
And a lot of things kept me from going back to Asia. I was married for some time and now divorced 3 years ago. I wouldn't have gone back to Asia had I still been in that situation.
Sure.
For other reasons, but yeah, I mean, I'm happy that I get the chance to go back home. In
Good
essence.
for you, man.
So,
Well, if people want to find you on social medias, where do they look?
I'm so not active on Instagram anymore.
All right,
I
so
hate Instagram.
forget it.
I have another part of my life that is the degenerate anonymous part of my life. So I'm on X a lot for non-pastry reasons.
Yeah, the whole crypto. That's a whole nother podcast.
That's a whole nother podcast.
We're gonna have to fly to Hong Kong for the next
Yeah,
part two of the podcast.
I'm deep
man.
down the crypto rabbit hole. Like we would need another hour because I can
Yeah.
geek out on that.
Right on.
But long story short, I started a small business with. Let me just give you that.
Yeah, plug the business.
No, I'm not plugging the business. I started a little side. You could call it a crypto startup. But the funniest thing is, my crypto journey's been long. It's been a roller coaster. There's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of painful moments, a lot of good moments. But ultimately, I went, and it sounds so funny when you say it out loud. I went into business with two guys that I've never met in my life. One is an Iraqi guy who lives in Sweden. One guy is he's an Israeli Jew living in Israel. And then there's me in the middle, the American.
combo.
And the beautiful thing is, we've now known each other for about a year. It wasn't until like probably 2 months ago that we actually all gave each other our real names.
Yeah.
Because we all went under like, in the crypto world, it's very degenerate,
Yeah.
very like anonymous, very like your
Big dick gangster.
yeah, your
357.
your profile pic is probably like some AI generated
Yeah.
fucking lizard. I'm a panda, so I go by Crypto Panda. So it wasn't until like 2 months ago that we all kind of like, yeah, this is my name, this is my name, this is my name. But the beautiful part about it is that whole part of my life that opened up doors and introduced me to so many amazing people that I actually interact with now on a daily basis that I actually consider friends.
Yeah.
And these two guys that I'm doing this with, they're amazing. And now once, one being from Iraq, one being, with everything going on with Palestine and Israel, not once did they ever make their relationship about that. And that was beautiful. Their commonality was crypto and surrounding themselves with other geeks, crypto geeks, and helping other people financially help change their lives. And that was what we stuck to. Not once have they ever, in the entire year that we've known each other, have I seen them talk about everything going on in that part of the world, with all the politics and religion. That's fucking beautiful.
It's refreshing.
And then there's me in the middle, and the
Venezuelan American Hong Kong.
Yeah, with an Israeli guy and an Iraqi guy from Sweden who we've never seen we've actually zoomed, not Zoom. We've been on our Discord live, so I know what they look like now. But for a long time, we didn't know our names. We didn't know what we looked like. We're just it went off this. Maybe it sounds naive, but I think you learn how to read people over time as you get older. And some people just give you this aura where you say, this person's going to screw me over. I don't trust this person. And other people, you could know for literally an hour and say, there's something about this person and I'm going to go with it. I'm going to go with that gut feeling and open up to them and let them into my life. And which I did, which we all did. We had faith in each other that we were all going to be decent human beings. And it's been beautiful.
That's
we
great.
run, we started this business about a month ago. It was in the works for a while. We have about 100 members now, that are paying a monthly subscription. And all those people now in that group are people that I look forward to checking in on every day. They've become it's my digital oasis. And some of these people have become my very close friends. And I may never even see their faces.
Yeah.
Which is fucking crazy.
But that's the world we live in,
that's
man.
another podcast. That's another podcast.
Thanks for hanging out, brother.
Dude, I could chill here all night.
I know, right? The couch is dangerous.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'll see you tomorrow. We're gonna
see you tomorrow for the pastry.
We're doing 2 days of pastry throwdown in your restaurant.
At Iggy's, yeah.
Love
cool,
it.
brother. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you, brother.